A lie told once is a mistake. A lie told twice is a choice. But a lie told every single day for 40 years across breakfasts and birthdays and graduations and holidays through a daughter's first steps and first heartbreak and first divorce. That is no longer a lie. That is a life. A whole counterfeit life, built on someone else's silence and maintained by everyone's agreement not to look too closely. My parents built that life. I lived in it, and I would still be living in it today if my aunt hadn't handed out 23 envelopes at a family reunion.
My name is Faith Delaney. I'm 40 years old. Last June, 150 members of my family gathered at my grandparents' farmstead outside Columbus, Ohio. There were white tents, potato, salad, a banner that read Delaney Family Reunion Established. My Aunt Patty, retired history teacher, had collected DNA samples from the family months earlier. She printed the results. She sealed them in envelopes. She thought it would be fun. My mother opened hers. Her face went white. My father looked at the ground, and I, the only dark-haired woman in a family of blondes, understood in 7 minutes what I had spent 40 years trying not to ask. Before I bring you back to that afternoon, subscribe, hit like, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from right now. Now let me take you to a Saturday in June, the morning the counterfeit life expired. The Delaney family reunion had been a tradition since 1982. Every June, the whole clan gathered at my grandparents' farmstead outside Columbus, Ohio, white tents folding tables end to end, an American flag snapping on the barn roof. 150 people, give or take. 4 generations of Delanes. My family was the kind of family other people in town wanted to be invited to Christmas dinner by. My father, Gerald, owned the oldest hardware store in the county. My mother, Linda, chaired the women's ministry at Grace Lutheran. They were pillars, steady, visible, respected. I arrived at 7 that morning, 2 hours before anyone else. My mother had called at 6. Bring the potato salad, honey. I've already assigned everything. She didn't ask what I wanted to bring. She never asked. She assigned. I set up chairs, unfolded tablecloths, arranged the drink station. When my brother Ryan showed up at 9, he went straight to the grill with my father, cold beers, already sweating in their hands. My sister Megan arrived at 9:30 carrying a store-bought pie and a story about traffic. Nobody asked why she was late. I'd been there for 2 hours. There's a photograph hanging in my parents' living room, the last professional family portrait we took maybe 8 years ago. My father in the center, my mother. Beside him, Ryan and Megan flanking. Them, all golden hair and broad smiles, and me on the far right, slightly outside the frame. When I pointed it out once, my mother said the photographer told me to stand there. She always had an explanation. But that afternoon, for the first time, my mother would have no explanation at all. Here's what you need to know about me. I have dark brown hair, almost black in a family of blondes. My eyes are green, deep green, the kind people comment on. Nobody in the Delaney family has green eyes. My father's are blue, my mother's are gray. Ryan's are blue. Megan's are blue, mine are green. I asked my mother why I looked so different. She didn't miss a beat. You take after your grandmother on my side, sweetheart. Great Aunt Dorothy had dark hair, too. I believed her. At 12, believing is easier than doubting. Ryan got my father's nose. Megan got my mother's smile. I got explanations. I became an ER nurse. 16 years now at Mercy General, working the overnight shift more often than not. I chose the job because I'm calm in chaos. The kind of calm where your hands are steady and your voice drops low and you're already 3 steps ahead of the crisis. People tell me I'm good at it. I think I'm good at it because I grew up in a kind of chaos nobody admitted existed. Let me teach you something about families that are hiding something. Watch who never stands in the center of the photograph. Watch who gets assigned the potato salad but never gets asked what they'd prefer. Watch who arrives 2 hours early and gets no thank you. These aren't accidents, they're architecture. I didn't know that yet on that Saturday in June. I just knew what I'd always known, that something about my place in this family felt slightly off-center, like a picture frame you keep straightening but it never quite holds.
150 people would arrive in 2 hours, and one envelope would explain everything. My Aunt Patricia, everyone called her. Patty was my mother's younger sister, retired history teacher, 60 years old, the kind of woman who organized her spice rack alphabetically and could tell you which branch of the family tree came through Ellis Island in 1904.
Genealogy was her passion. She'd been building a family tree on Ancestry.com for years.
6 months before the reunion, Patty had sent Ancestry DNA kits to 23 of us, the core family from each branch. Spit in the tube, mail it back to me. I'll have everything compiled for the reunion. We all did it. Fun little project. Nobody thought twice. She arrived that morning carrying a cardboard box. She walked straight to the microphone, the same one Uncle Dave used every year for the blessing, and tapped it twice. I have a surprise for everyone. She held up the box. Inside, 23 envelopes, each one labeled with a name. 6 months ago, I sent DNA kits to all of you. Today, we open the results together. We're going to see where we all come from. The crowd erupted. Kids cheered. Cousins elbowed each other. Bet, I'm part Viking. $20 says there's royalty in here somewhere. I took my envelope. I felt something I can only describe as relief. Finally, I thought. Finally, I'll know why I'm different. I expected to find some distant Mediterranean branch on my mother's side, the dark-haired great aunt she always mentioned. Then I looked across the table. My mother wasn't smiling. Her hand was gripping her glass of iced tea, so tightly her knuckles had gone white, and my father was watching Aunt Patty with an expression I had never seen on his face. It wasn't anger, it was fear. Patty counted down from 3. Envelopes tore open across the yard. Laughter, first, always laughter. Uncle Dave, 47% English, called it. Cousin Rachel, 3% Scandinavian. I am Viking, a teenager at the far table held up his results and yelled, I'm 2% West African. This is awesome. I unfolded my sheet. My ethnicity estimate looked nothing like what I expected. Italian, Mediterranean, a thick wedge of Southern European ancestry that had no business being on a Delaney result. But I didn't get to process that because the laughter stopped, not everywhere at once. It stopped at our table first. The way sound dies in an emergency room when the monitor flatlines. Not silence exactly, but the absence of everything that was just there. My mother had opened her envelope. Her face was the color of the tablecloth, white, paper white. She was staring at the results, but her eyes weren't moving. She wasn't reading. She was frozen. She looked at my father. My father looked at his shoes. I looked down at my own results again. Below the ethnicity breakdown, there was a section I hadn't noticed. DNA relatives, a list of matched family members in the database. Ryan Delaney, predicted relationship, half-sibling. Megan Delaney, predicted relationship, half-sibling. Gerald Delaney, no match. No match? And at the bottom, Thomas Calloway, predicted relationship father. I had never heard that name in my life. I looked up. My mother was staring at me, and for the first time in 40 years, I saw her, really saw her. Not the woman I knew. Not the mother who chaired the women's ministry and baked casseroles for every church potluck. A woman who had just been caught. 7 minutes. That's how long it took for 40 years to collapse. Let me walk you through the first 3. The smell of charcoal from the grill, the sound of kids playing tag somewhere behind the barn, sunlight falling across the picnic, tables in long golden bars. All of it still there, the whole world still working while mine cracked down the center. I looked at Ryan. He was still laughing at his results. Hadn't looked up. Megan was taking a selfie, holding her sheet next to her face. They didn't know yet. I looked at the name again. Thomas Calloway, father. My mother stood up. She was trying to smile. The kind of smile I'd seen 1,000 times in the one patients wear when they're about to deliver bad news to themselves. Patty. Her voice was too bright. These things have errors all the time. You know that, right? Each the lab probably mixed something up. Aunt Patty blinked. Errors? Linda, I used the same lab for all 23, the same batch. Well, clearly, something went wrong. What went wrong? My mother didn't answer. She looked at my father again. He was still staring at his shoes. His jaw was set. His hands were flat on the table. He hadn't opened his envelope. He hadn't needed to. Let me teach you something about deception. When someone hears bad news that's truly a surprise, they react. They flinch. They gasp. They say, "What?" My father did none of those things. He sat perfectly still, like a man who had been waiting for a storm he'd watched build on the horizon for 4 decades. Gerald Delaney wasn't surprised. He had known the entire time. Ryan finally looked up. "Mom, what's going on?" My mother reached for that bright voice. Again. "Nothing, honey. There's a mistake. In the there's no mistake." My father, 3 words, flat as a slab of concrete. He didn't look at my mother when he said, "It." He looked at the table. Then slowly, he raised his eyes to me. "I've known, since before you were born. 150 people, not one of them breathing. My brain did something it had never done before. It pulled up 40 years of evidence in about 3 seconds. Career day. He went to Megan's class, not mine, the fishing trips. Always Ryan, always Megan. Never room on the boat. My high school graduation. A signed check, but an empty seat. My wedding. He walked me down the aisle and gave a toast that was 2 words long to faith. Ryan laughed and said, "Dad's a man of few words." No. And he was a man with nothing to say because I was never his story. I set my envelope down on the table. I stood up. 150 pairs of eyes shifted to me. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't run. 16 years of ER training will do that to you. When everything is falling apart, your voice drops and your hands go still. I looked at my mother. "How long were you going to let me live inside your lie?" She opened her mouth then, closed it, and for the first time in 40 years, Linda Delaney, the woman who had an answer for everything, an explanation for every question, a redirect for every doubt, had nothing. The woman's ministry, chair, speechless. What happened next was the kind of chaos that looked calm from the outside. My mother started crying, not the kind of crying that comes from remorse, the kind that comes from being exposed, her shoulders curled inward, her hands pressed against her chest. "You don't understand what I went through. None of you understand." Ryan was on his feet in seconds, but he didn't go to our mother. He went to Aunt Patty. He pointed his finger at her like a weapon. "Are you happy now? You just destroyed this family. Was your little science project worth it?" Patty's hands were shaking. "Ryan, I didn't. I had no idea. You had no idea. You handed out DNA tests at a family reunion, and you had no idea something like this could happen." I watched 16 years of reading rooms, reading body language and panic and deflection, and I watched the pattern form in real time. My mother was the one who had lied for 40 years. My father was the one who had kept that lie alive. But Ryan was attacking Patty the messenger. "Let me teach you something about families with secrets. When the truth comes out, the family doesn't turn on the person who created the lie. They turn on the person who exposed it. They call it keeping the peace. I call it protecting the liar." A great aunt near the dessert table murmured to her husband, "Poor Linda. She doesn't deserve this." I heard it. Every word. My father stood up without speaking, walked to the barn, and disappeared inside. No defense of his wife. No denial, no comfort, just a man retreating to the structure he understood. Wood and nails and silence. I was still standing. I wasn't finished. I followed my mother into the farmhouse kitchen. She'd retreated there the way she always retreated into a space she controlled. Her kitchen, her territory. But she wasn't alone. 2 of my older aunts had followed, hovering near the doorway like witnesses who hadn't decided whose side they were on. "Good, let them hear. Explain it to me," I said, "all of it." My mother wiped her eyes with a paper towel, took a breath, and then she did what she had always done. She told a story, the version she wanted me to hear. "In 1985, your father took a job setting up a second store location. He was gone 3 months. I was 23 years old, alone in that house. No car, half the time, no family nearby. Thomas Calloway was the carpenter hired to fix our roof." She paused. "It just happened. And when you got pregnant, the timing didn't line up.
I knew. I told your father when I was 7 months along." Another pause. "He had two choices. Leave or stay. If he left, Faith, I had no degree, no income, 3 children. I would have lost everything. The house, the insurance, the church, everything. So he stayed. He stayed, and the deal was silence. She didn't deny it. Nobody was supposed to know ever. I let that sit for a moment. The ants in the doorway were statues. You didn't keep a family, Mom. You kept a lie and called it a family." Her face crumpled. "Everything I did was for you kids. No, everything you did was for you, and you stole 2 things. The truth from me and my existence from my biological father. Does Thomas Calloway even know I exist?" She looked away. "No, 40 years he never knew. Silence. I found Gerald in the barn, and he was sitting on a wooden chair near the tool bench holding a can of beer he hadn't opened. Dust drifted through the light from the window. A horsefly buzzed somewhere above us. Why did you stay? He didn't look up. Because this is my family's farm. Because my mother was still alive. Because of the church. Because of everything I'd built in this town." He turned the can slowly in his hands. "And because I thought I could love you like my own." He stopped. "I waited, but I couldn't." 3 words. And somehow they cut deeper than the DNA. Results. Deeper than my mother's excuses. Deeper than 40 years of being the one who stood at the edge of the photograph because my mother had lied. That was a choice. But Gerald had tried and failed, and that was something worse. That was the truth. "You knew. Every single day," I said, "every career. Day you missed, every fishing trip you didn't invite me on, every birthday you forgot. You knew why. Telling you wouldn't have helped. It would have helped me understand." He finally looked at me. His eyes were red but dry. Gerald Delaney did not cry. Gerald Delaney endured. That was his whole identity, the man who endured. "I didn't need you to love me like your own," I said. "I needed you to tell me the truth." He looked down at the unopened beer. The horsefly landed on the window and went quiet. I stood there for a long time. Then I walked out. I didn't hate him. I didn't forgive him either. I just finally understood the architecture of my childhood. Every room I wasn't invited into, every door that stayed closed. On the drive home, my brain replayed 40 years of evidence like a highlight reel I never asked to see. 8 years old. Gerald took Ryan and Megan fishing at Lake Buckeye. I asked to go. He said the boat only held 3. That boat held 5. I know because I counted the seats the next time we visited Uncle Dave's dock. 15. Career. Day at school. Megan came home beaming. Dad visited my class today. I asked why he didn't come to mine. My mother, he had a delivery at the store. Honey, Gerald went to Megan's class. He didn't come to mine. 18. Graduation day. Gerald signed the tuition check. He did not attend the ceremony. My mother explained he had back pain. His back was fine 2 days later when he helped Ryan move furniture into his first apartment. 25. My wedding. Gerald walked me down the aisle, because that's what fathers do. At the reception, he raised his glass to Faith. 2 words. Ryan's wedding. Gerald spoke for 4 minutes, told stories, made people laugh. My reception. Got 2 words and a glass of champagne. He didn't finish. 32. My divorce. Gerald said nothing. My mother called once. These things happen, sweetheart. Ryan and Megan got Sunday dinners. I got a phone call. I used to make excuses for him. He's quiet. He's old-fashioned. He's not good with emotions. My mother made those excuses too, every time. The back pain, the boat, capacity, the delivery schedule. Every excuse was a small lie protecting the big one. 40 years of clues. And I, the ear nurse, trained to read symptoms, trained to catch the thing everyone else misses. Missed every symptom in my own family. That's the cruelest part. And I was looking everywhere except home. I didn't make it to my car. Ryan caught me in the driveway halfway between the barn and my sedan. His face was flushed. He'd been arguing with someone. Patty, probably. And now he was redirecting. You need to stop. You're making everything worse. Worse for who, Ryan? For Mom, for Dad, for all of us. He stepped closer. His voice dropped. The way men drop their voices when they want to sound reasonable, but aren't. They raised you. They fed you. They put you through nursing school. What more do you want? The truth. That's what I want. The truth. He laughed. Short. Ugly. The truth is that Dad stayed. He could have walked away, and he didn't. And now you're standing here acting like they owe you something. I looked at my brother, half-brother.
My brain corrected, and I hated it for that. And I saw something I recognized. Fear. Ryan wasn't angry at me. He was terrified because if our father could keep this secret for 40 years, what else was buried? If the foundation was cracked, Ryan's whole house was shaking too. Behind him, the reunion was dissolving. Cars pulling out of the grass, cousins carrying foil-covered dishes back to their trunks, a grate, uncle folding chairs alone. The Delaney family reunion, 42 years of tradition, ending in whispers and gravel dust. One of the older cousins passed us on the way to her car. She touched Ryan's arm. "Your poor mother," she said. "She doesn't deserve this. She didn't look at me." Ryan's jaw tightened. "You're still my sister." And for the first time, I wondered, was I? I got in my car, turned the key, pulled out of the driveway without looking back. I didn't leave right away. I pulled my car to the end of the gravel road and sat there, engine running, hands on the wheel. I didn't know where to go. My apartment felt too far. The highway felt too fast. Everything felt like it was moving, except me. My phone buzzed. "Megan, I'm on the back porch. Come sit with me, please." I turned the car around. Megan was on the porch swing, knees drawn up, her DNA results folded in her lap. She didn't say anything when I sat down beside her. We just swung there for a while, the chain creaking, cicadas screaming in the fields. "Remember when you told me you always felt like you'd been delivered to the wrong family?" she said quietly. "You laughed. I thought you were joking." She turned to look at me. "You weren't joking." "No, I noticed things too. You know, the way Dad always took photos with me and Ryan, but somehow forgot to call you over. The way Mom talked about us, Ryan's promotion, Megan's classroom, and then just Faith is fine. She's busy." She wiped her eyes. I didn't know why, but I should have asked. I didn't tell her it was okay because it wasn't, but I put my hand on hers. "There's something else," Megan said. "Mom called me 3 times the week before the reunion asking if Aunt Patty had said anything about the DNA results. She was nervous, Faith. She already knew what those envelopes would show." I let that settle. My mother knew. She had the chance to tell the truth before the reunion. She had the chance to call Patty, to pull the results, to sit me down in her kitchen and say the words herself. She gambled instead, and she lost. I sat in my car outside the farmstead for a long time after Megan went inside. The reunion was over, tents half collapsed, paper plates in the trash, the Delaney family banner, established 1982. Still strung between 2 fence posts, one corner drooping. I picked up my phone and typed a name into the search bar. Thomas Calloway. It took less than 30 seconds. Calloway Custom Woodwork, Granville, Ohio, a small business page, a personal Facebook profile, and a profile picture of a man in his 60 seconds, standing next to a finished dining table. Silver hair, weathered hands, green eyes. I looked at myself in the rearview mirror, my eyes, his eyes, the same color, the same shape around the outer corners. 40 years of asking why, don't I look like anyone, and the answer was a Facebook photo 3 inches from my face. My hands were shaking. They hadn't shaken since nursing school. Not during codes, not during traumas, not during the night a teenager came in after a car wreck and I held pressure on his femoral artery for 9 minutes until the surgeon arrived. But they were shaking now. I wanted to call him. I wanted to hear his voice and ask if it sounded like mine. But I stopped myself because Thomas Calloway had a life, maybe a wife, maybe children. I could be about to detonate his world the same way that envelope had detonated mine. And I had a life too, one that was still unfinished. I was 6 weeks into the adoption process for a little girl named Lily. 6 years, old, brown hair, foster care. She was waiting for me, and I would not carry my chaos to anyone's doorstep until I'd sorted through the wreckage of my own. 3 hours away, green eyes, a stranger who was my father. That night, my phone lit up like a hospital switchboard. 3 texts from my mother, back to back, each one a different strategy. 8:14 p.m., we need to talk about this in person. Come home. We'll sort this out as a family. 8:47, this is Patty's fault. She had no right to hand out those tests without thinking about the consequences. 9:22 p.m., don't make this bigger than it is. Faith, please, let me break those down for you. The first one, sort this out as a family, means let me control who hears what. The second, blaming Patty, means redirect the target so I'm not it. The third, don't make this bigger than it is. That's the one that burns. And because when someone tells you not to make it bigger, it means it's already bigger than they want to admit. Ryan texted at 10. Mom's been crying all night. Are you satisfied? I didn't respond to any of them. I sat in my apartment in the dark, phone on the table, screen flashing. At 11:47 p.m., one final message from my mother. Everything I did for you. And I realized that was her line, her signature line, the one she delivered every time I questioned anything, every time I doubted, every time I felt the ground shift beneath me and asked why. I did it for you. Year after year, decade after decade, a script so polished it could pass for love. But it wasn't love, it was management, and I had been managed my entire life. I turned my phone face down on the table, pulled a blanket over my shoulders, stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow, I had a problem to solve because Lily's adoption file contained a medical history that was completely wrong. I was sitting in my apartment that night, phone full of messages from people telling me I was tearing this family apart. And I kept thinking, was I, or had it been torn apart 40 years ago and I was just the last one to find out? If you've ever been told you're making things worse for asking a question you had every right to ask, type my right in the comments. And if this story is hitting close to home, subscribe because this is far from over. The next morning, reality hit harder than emotion. I sat at my kitchen table with Lily's adoption file open in front of me. Page 7, Family Medical History. I had filled it out 2 months earlier, sitting in the same chair, copying down everything I knew about the Delaney side, Gerald's father's heart, disease, his mother's early onset, arthritis, the diabetes that ran through the family like a river. None of it was mine. I called Lily's caseworker at 9, explained the situation in the calmest voice I could manage, clinical, factual, the way I give reports to attending physicians. There's been a significant change in my biological family information. The medical history I submitted is inaccurate. I need to update it. Silence on the other end. Then faith. We'll need the corrected information before we can move forward. If you can't provide accurate family medical history, it could delay the process. Delay. That word landed in my chest like a fist. Because somewhere across town, a 6-year-old girl in a foster home was waiting. Lily had already waited long enough. 3 placements in 4 years. She'd already been let down by every adult who was supposed to show up. I was not going to be the 4th. But I needed Thomas Calloway's medical history, and I had never spoken to the man. I called Aunt Patty. She picked up on the first ring. She'd been waiting, I think, for someone in the family to call her without yelling. Patty, I need your help. Can you pull Thomas Calloway's contact information from the Ancestry DNA match? Of course, honey. Give me 20 minutes. She called. Back in 15. Thomas Calloway, Granville, Ohio, a mailing address, an Ancestry DNA, message portal. I had a door. Now I needed the nerve to knock on it. I met Patty at a coffee shop the next day. Neutral ground. She was already sitting when I arrived, both hands wrapped around a mug she wasn't drinking from. I'm so sorry, Faith. If I had known, I stopped her. You don't owe me an apology. You didn't create the secret. You just turned the lights on. She exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for days. Patty pulled out her laptop and walked me through the Ancestry DNA dashboard. Thomas Calloway's profile, his relative match to me, the predicted relationship labeled parent. She showed me how to send him a message through the portal. There's something else, Patty said, closing the laptop halfway. Something I probably should have told you at the reunion, but everything happened so fast. Tell me now. When the results came, back 3 weeks ago, I reviewed them before printing. I noticed your match didn't include Gerald. I assumed it was a processing error, a glitch. So I called Linda. My stomach dropped. You called my mother. I told her one of the results looked unusual. I asked if there was anything I should know before I printed the full set. Patty looked at her coffee. She told me to print everything. She said there was no problem. I sat back in my chair. My mother had been warned. 3 weeks before the reunion, Patty had handed her a lifeline, a chance to pull Faith's results, to sit me down privately, to control the moment on her own terms. And my mother had said, print everything, because Stopping the printout would have required an explanation, and explaining was the one thing Linda Delaney could not afford to do. She rolled the dice. She bet on silence one more time, and she lost. 2 a.m, my apartment, the ceiling fan, turning slow circles above my bed, and I picked up my phone and called the one person I trusted to hear me without trying to fix me. June Porter, my best friend since college, social worker, mother of 2, the kind of woman who would drive 3 hours at midnight if you asked her to. She answered on the second ring. Faith. I finally know why I never felt like I belonged. She didn't say, "Oh my God." She didn't say, "Are you okay?" She said, "Tell me all of it." So I did. The DNA results. Gerald's 3-word confession. My mother's deflection in the kitchen. Ryan pointing his finger at Patty like she was the criminal. Megan's quiet hand on mine. The great aunt murmuring, "Poor Linda." The name on my results, Thomas Calloway, and his green eyes staring at me from a Facebook photo. June listened for 20 minutes without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "You have every right to be angry. You have every right to be sad. And you get to decide what happens next. Not your mother, not Ryan, not anyone I want to contact, Thomas, but I'm scared." Of what? I was quiet for a moment. That he won't want me either. June's voice went soft. "Then you'll know, and knowing is always better than wondering." I stared at the ceiling fan. "Round and round. Faith," she said, just before hanging up. "Who you are didn't change because of a piece of paper, but the truth changes everything." She was right. It had already changed everything. The difference was that now I got to choose what I built from the rubble. I set my phone down. I closed my eyes. Tomorrow I would write to Thomas Calloway 1 week after the reunion. Yet I was halfway through a 12-hour overnight shift at Mercy General. A quiet night, just 2 patients in the department, when the charge nurse told me someone was in the waiting room asking for me. She says she's your mother. I found Linda sitting in a plastic chair near the vending machines, purse on her lap, coat buttoned to the collar, even though it was 70 degrees outside. She looked 10 years older than she had a week ago. "I need to talk to you." "I'm working, Mom. Please, 5 minutes." I took my break. We stood in the parking lot under the fluorescent glow of the emergency entrance sign. Moth circled the light above us. "You need to stop digging," she said. "This is going to destroy everything we've built." "What did we build, Mom?" "A family on a lie." She changed tactics. The shift was seamless in the way it always was. The commanding voice dropped away and something softer moved in. Calculated softness. "I sacrificed everything. Faith, I stayed with your father." His silence, his coldness, the way he looked at me every single day like I owed him. "I endured all of that for you. You stayed because you had no other choice, and you turned your fear into my cage." Her eyes flashed. "If you contact Thomas Calloway, I will never forgive you." I looked at my mother, this woman who had orchestrated every detail of our family story for 40 years, who had assigned the potato, salad, and the seating chart, and the version of history everyone was allowed to believe. And I said, "The only thing left to say, you need to forgive yourself, Mom, not me." I went back inside. My break was over 2 weeks after the reunion. My phone rang at 6 in the evening, a number I recognized but almost never saw on my screen. Gerald. He had not called me voluntarily since I was 18 years old. "I want to explain," he said. His voice was flat, the way it always was. Flat like a road with no turns. "You've had 40 years to explain." Silence. The sound of him breathing. Somewhere in the background, a television, the evening news. Maybe he was probably sitting in the recliner at the store, the one he kept in the back, office for nights. He didn't want to go home. I was afraid, he said finally, afraid that if I told you, you'd leave. And if you left, your mother would fall apart. And if she fell apart, everything I built would fall apart with her. So you chose everything else over me. The farm, the church, the store, your reputation. Another silence longer this time. I didn't know any other way. First, no Gerald, and that's the saddest part. I used his first name. I don't know when I decided to do that. It came out naturally like something my mouth had been waiting to say for decades. Not dad, not father. Gerald, a man's name, a stranger's name. He didn't correct me. I'm going to contact Thomas Calloway. I said, not because I want to hurt you, because I need medical records for Lily's adoption and because I deserve to know where I come from. He was quiet for a long time. Then, I hope he's a good man. 4 words, the closest Gerald Delaney would ever come to giving me permission. I hung up. I sat in my car in the hospital parking lot. Then I opened Ancestry DNA and started typing. I wrote the message 6 times before I sent it. Draft 1 was too formal. It read like a legal notice. Draft 2 was too emotional. I sounded desperate. Drafts 3 through 5 were variations of the same attempt to sound normal, which is impossible when you're writing to a stranger who might be your father. Draft 6. Mr. Calloway, my name is Faith Delaney. I recently discovered through a DNA test that you may be my biological father. I was born in March 1986. I don't want to disrupt your life, but if you're open to it, I would like to talk. I hit send. I put my phone in a drawer. I went to work. 12 hours later, 12 hours of IV drips and intake forms, and 1 compound fracture. I came home, showered, and opened the drawer. 1 new message. Faith, I have been staring at your message for 6 hours. I didn't know. I am so sorry. I didn't know. Yes, please call me. I read it 4 times, then a 5th. I kept coming back to 3 words. I didn't know. In 40 years, everyone in my life who held this secret had known. My mother knew. Gerald knew. And apparently my mother's fear was so thorough, so airtight that she erased me from the one person who had the most right to know I existed. Thomas Calloway didn't know he had a daughter, and he apologized for it. My mother, who knew for 40 years, who chose silence every single morning for 14,600 mornings, never apologized for anything. A stranger said sorry before my own mother did. I sat on my bed, phone in my hand, reading those words over and over until the screen went dark. Tomorrow I would call him. His voice was deeper than I expected. Warm, a little rough around the edges, like someone who had spent decades working with his hands and talking to customers across a workshop counter. Faith. He said my name like he was trying it on, like it was something new and fragile. Mr. Calloway. Thomas, please. I told him what I knew. The reunion, the DNA kits, the results. Gerald's confession, my mother's silence. He listened without interrupting, the same way June had, but heavier. I could hear the weight of it settling on him in real time. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. When your mother stopped returning my calls in '85, I knew something had changed. I wrote her a letter, asked if there was anything I needed to know. He paused. She never wrote back. A letter, he had asked, and she chose silence. Thomas told me his story. In 1985, and he was 24, a carpenter hired to repair the Delaney farmhouse roof. Gerald was away for 3 months. He and Linda were close for a few weeks. Then she cut contact. No explanation. He moved away, built a life, married a woman named Dorothy, had 2 sons, Rob, now 35, and James, 33. Dorothy died 5 years ago, pancreatic cancer. My life's been small, he said. Workshop, my boys, Sunday dinners. I never felt like anything was missing, he paused. Until I got your message. I'm not ready to meet in person yet, I said. I understand, but soon. I've waited 40 years without knowing I was waiting. First. Can wait a little longer. When we hung up, I sat with my phone in my lap and cried. Not from sadness, from the strange, unbearable relief of being welcomed by someone who owed me nothing. 1 month after the reunion, a knock on my apartment door at 8 on a Tuesday night. No text first, no call. Ryan, he looked like he hadn't slept in a week. Stubble, wrinkled polo, the kind of exhaustion that lives behind the eyes. "Mom's sick," he said, still standing in the hallway. "She's not eating. She's not sleeping. She won't leave the house. Dad's been sleeping at the store. You need to come home and fix this." I leaned against the door frame. I didn't break this, Ryan. A DNA test didn't break. 40 years of lying broke this. And I'm not going back to play the role of everything's fine so everyone else can be comfortable. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Do you remember Dad forgetting your birthday?" he said. And his voice was different now. Smaller. "You were 16. I was 14, and I asked him why he forgot. He said, I didn't forget. I just didn't remember." Ryan's jaw tightened. I told myself he was tired. That's what I said. He's just tired, and now I get it. His eyes were red. "I'm sorry." He didn't hug me. Ryan wasn't that kind of man. He'd learned stoicism from Gerald the Way. Some sons learn to throw a football. But he came inside. He sat on my couch. He didn't leave. We didn't talk about Mom. We didn't talk about Thomas. We watched a rerun of something on television. I don't even remember what. And for 45 minutes, we just sat in the same room without pretending. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't resolution. But it was the first honest hour my brother and I had spent together in a very long time. Sometimes that's enough to start. I wrote the letter by hand, not an email, not a text, pen on paper, the way my mother's generation communicated when they wanted something to count. I addressed it to Linda and Gerald Delaney. I mailed it from the post office on 5th Street, the one with the eagle mural on the outside wall. I stood on the sidewalk afterward, blinking in the afternoon sun, feeling lighter than I had in 40 years. This is what it said, more or less. "Mom, Gerald, I don't hate either of you, but I will not keep living in a story that was written for me without my knowledge or consent. I need time. I'm not cutting you off permanently, but I will be the one who decides when I'm ready to talk. Not you, not Ryan, me. Please don't call. I will reach out when I'm ready. That's it. No accusations, no list of grievances, no dramatic farewell, just a line drawn in ink. Let me teach you something about boundaries. They're not punishment. They're not revenge. A boundary is you saying, I matter enough to be treated honestly. And if someone tells you that your boundary is selfish, what they're really telling you is that your compliance was more valuable to them than your well-being. You don't have to burn bridges. You just have to stop being the only person building them. I drove home with the windows down. The air smelled like cut grass and warm asphalt. I had a phone call to return. Lily's caseworker confirming the updated documents. I had a message to draft to Thomas asking about his family's medical history. I had a life to rebuild, not from scratch, from truth. For the first time in 40 years, I was not carrying something that didn't belong to me. I just mailed that letter. My hands weren't shaking. And if you know me by now, you know that's significant. I spent 40 years carrying something that was never mine to carry. If you're carrying something like that, right now, a family secret, a role you didn't choose, a silence that's been eating you alive, I want you to know, putting it down isn't selfish. It's survival. Hit that subscribe button and stay with me, because this story isn't ending where you think. 6 months after the reunion, a Saturday in December, I drove east on I-7 toward Granville. 3 hours. That's how far my biological father had been living. 3 hours from the woman who erased him from my life. 3 hours from the daughter he never knew existed. Close enough for a day trip. Close enough that we might have passed each other at a gas station or a rest. Stop and never known. Ohio in December is flat and gray. Frozen cornfields, white church steeples, small towns with names like Pataskala and Hebron and Granville, towns built by people who stayed put and built things with their hands. I grew up in a town just like these. I had the DNA results in my passenger seat. The envelope from the reunion creased at the corners, now soft. From handling, I didn't bring it as evidence. I brought it because it was the object that ended one life and started another. I thought about what I would say. I practiced sentences in my head and abandoned them. What do you say to the man who fathered you and never knew? Nice to meet you. I have your eyes. Where have you been? The GPS said. Destination in 2 miles. My heart rate climbed. I recognized the feeling. The same spike I get when a critical patient rolls through the ER doors. Adrenaline, focus, the need to be present for whatever comes next. 1 mile, half a mile. A turn onto a residential road. Oak trees, a mailbox that said Callaway. I pulled into the driveway of a small wooden house with a workshop behind it. Sawdust on the porch steps, a wind chime made of copper pipes. And on the front porch, standing with his hands in his jacket pockets, a man who had been waiting. Thomas Callaway was tall, taller than I expected. Silver hair, thick, swept back from his forehead. Hands that looked like they'd held 1,000 pieces of wood and shaped them into something useful. And those eyes, green, deep green, the exact shade I saw every morning in my bathroom mirror. I got out of the car and we stood 15 feet apart, the December air between us, and neither of us spoke. He broke first. You have your grandmother's eyes. My mother, same color. I almost laughed. Almost. And I have your nose. He smiled. It was a careful smile, the kind people wear when they're afraid the moment might shatter if they move too fast. He extended his hand. I took it. His grip was firm and warm and rough with calluses. He held on a beat longer than a handshake requires, not a hug, just a hold. The house was clean and simple wooden furniture, all handmade, all beautiful. On the walls, framed, photos of 2 young men I didn't recognize but immediately knew. Rob, James, my brothers, half-brothers. They had Thomas's jawline and wide shoulders. They look like me, I said, and my voice cracked. They do. Thomas made coffee and we sat at his kitchen table. Oak hand joined, the kind of table that could survive a century. He told me about his life, the workshop. Dorothy, his wife, gone 5 years now. Rob, a electrician in New York. James, a high school shop teacher in Zanesville. Sunday dinners, quiet years. My life's been small, he said again. But it was never empty. At least I didn't think it was. He wrapped both hands around his mug. Then I got your message, and I realized there had been a hole I didn't know was there. I told Rob and James, they want to meet you. He took me to the workshop after coffee. The smell hit me first. Oak and cedar and linseed oil, warm and rich. The kind of smell that fills your lungs and makes you breathe slower. Tools hung on pegboard walls. A lathe sat in the corner, dusted with fine shavings. Half-finished projects lined the benches. A cabinet door, a set of shelves, a small jewelry box with dovetailed joints so tight you couldn't see the seams. I build to order, Thomas said, running his hand along a tabletop. Tables, cabinets, beds. Every piece of wood has a different grain. No 2 are alike. I understand that. I'm an ear nurse. Every patient is different. He looked at me. Really looked. The way you study something you want to remember. A nurse. That's good work. He walked me to the far corner where a rocking chair sat, unfinished. Smooth arms, curved runners, a high back, shaped like a cello. It was beautiful. I'm making this for my granddaughter, Rob's girl. I ran my fingers along the arm, sanded down to silk. Lily, I said. And then I told him about her. 6 years, old brown hair, foster care for most of her life. The adoption that was finally moving forward, delayed by a medical history that had been wrong until a DNA test corrected it. Thomas was quiet for a moment. Then, would you want me to make one for Lily? The question sat in, the air like sawdust floating. You want to be her grandfather if you'll let me, I cried. For the first time since the reunion, real tears, not from grief, not from anger, but from the strange, overwhelming experience of being claimed, welcome, chosen. He handed me a shop rag. Sorry, it's all I've got. I laughed. I couldn't help it. The drive home took 3 hours, and for the first time in months, I didn't spend them replaying the worst moments of the reunion. I replayed the workshop, the rocking chair, the shopway, hopeful voice. Halfway home, my phone buzzed in the cup holder. Megan, hey, Mom wants to write you a letter. Are you okay with that? I thought about it for a full mile before responding. She can write. I'll read it when I'm ready. I understand. A pause then. You're still my sister, Faith. DNA or not? I smiled. DNA or not, Megan told me, more. Ryan had changed quietly the way. Ryan did everything. He'd stopped defending our mother out loud. He'd started asking his own questions. Not to Faith, not to Linda, to himself. The kind of questions that don't have answers, but need to be asked anyway. Gerald was still sleeping at the store. He and Linda shared a house, but barely shared a room. 40 years of silence had finally cracked open, and what spilled out wasn't relief. It was all the other. Silences they'd been hiding behind the big one. They're not doing well, Megan said. I know. Are you going to visit? Not yet. I'll come when I'm ready, not when someone tells me I should. I hung up and drove through the dark, past frozen fields and blinking stoplights in towns I'd never stopped in. The December sky was black and wide and cold. And somewhere in it, somewhere behind the clouds, there were more stars than I could count. I didn't need to count them. I just needed to know they were there. Linda's letter would come. I would read it when the time was right. 7 months after the reunion. January. Lily's caseworker called on a Wednesday morning. Everything looks good, Faith. Updated medical history is verified. We're moving to the next phase. I sat down on my kitchen floor and pressed my back against the cabinet. Updated medical history verified. The paperwork that had been wrong for months, filled with Gerald's family tree instead of Thomas's, was now corrected. Heart disease on the Calloway side, no diabetes. A maternal grandmother who lived to 93. The truth on paper for the first time. That weekend, I visited Lily at her foster home. She was sitting on the front steps when I pulled up, wearing a puffy jacket 2 sizes too big, and sneakers with the laces untied. Are you the one who's going to take me home? I knelt down to tie her shoes. If you want me to, I want you to, she said it the way 6-year-olds say things, like it was obvious, like it had already been decided, like the only question was why. It hadn't happened sooner. I thought about Gerald, how he said he tried to love me but couldn't. I thought about my mother, who loved me but wrapped that love in so many lies it became unrecognizable. And I thought about Thomas, who didn't know I existed until 6 months ago, but offered to build a rocking chair for a little girl he'd never met. Love isn't just feeling, it's what you do with the feeling. That evening, Thomas texted me a photo, the rocking chair, finished. White oak, honeycombed with smooth runners and a high back. On the top of the backrest, carved in clean block, letters L.D. Lee Delaney. I kept the name Delaney, not because it was Gerald's, because it was mine. I'd carried it for 40 years. I'd earned it. 8 months after. The reunion, February. Linda's letter arrived on a Tuesday in a plain white envelope with her careful handwriting on the front. No return address, as if she was still trying to control what could be traced back to her. I opened it at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and the television off. 3 pages, single-spaced, her best penmanship. She didn't say, "I'm sorry." She said, "You need to understand what it was like." She described 1,985. The loneliness, the house, the 3 months without Gerald, the young carpenter who was kind to her when nobody else was. She described the terror of realizing the timeline didn't add up, the conversation with Gerald at 7 months, his cold transactional decision to stay, the deal they made in the kitchen of the farmhouse. Silence. Permanent, total, airtight silence. "I was afraid of losing you," she wrote. "I was. Afraid of losing everything. I know I was wrong, but I didn't know how to be anything else. I folded the letter, set it on the table, drank my coffee. Here's what I noticed, and if you take one thing from my story, let it be this. My mother wrote 3 pages, she explained. She contextualized. She described her fear and her loneliness and the impossible position she was in. But nowhere, not once, not in 3 pages, did she write the words, "I'm sorry." She wrote, "I was wrong." She wrote, "I was afraid." She wrote, "I didn't know how to be anything else." But I'm sorry those 2 words never appeared if someone writes you 3 pages of explanation without 2 words of apology. You're reading a defense, not a reckoning. I put the letter in a drawer. I didn't throw it away. I didn't burn it, and I just put it somewhere I wouldn't see it every day. Christmas that year was small, 3 people. My apartment, a tabletop tree from the drugstore, and a string of white lights I'd had since my 20 seconds. Lily was in her place with me, the adoption not yet finalized, but close. She wore pajamas with snowflakes on them and ate pancakes sitting cross-legged on the living room floor. June came over at noon with wine and a casserole and the kind of presents that makes a room feel complete. Thomas had sent the rocking chair by freight. It arrived 4 days before Christmas, wrapped in moving blankets and smelling like the workshop. Lily sat in it immediately, tucking her knees up, pulling a pillow to her chest. "Your grandpa made this for you," I told her. "I have a grandpa. You have a grandpa." She rocked slowly, pressing her cheek against the smooth oak armrest. "It smells like outside." On December 26th, Megan stopped by. She brought a plate of cookies, our mother's recipe, the shortbread with the powdered sugar, the ones Linda made every year. She didn't say they were from Mom. She didn't have 2. I took the plate. "Thank you." Ryan called on FaceTime that evening. Short, a little stilted. "Merry Christmas, sis." "Merry Christmas, Ryan." Gerald did not call. I did not wait. That night, after Lily was asleep and June had gone home, I sat in the rocking chair Thomas built and looked at my apartment. Small, quiet mine. A Christmas tree from the drugstore. A sleeping child in the next room, a plate of my mother's cookies on the counter. A chair made by a man I'd known for 6 months who already felt more present than the man who'd raised me for 40 years. I stopped trying to belong somewhere. I built where I belong. Spring, April. I drove Lily to Granville to meet Thomas. She talked the entire 3 hours about school, about her friend, Marcus, about a dog she saw at the park that she wanted me to adopt. I let her talk. The car was warm and the road was straight, and her voice filled every corner of it. Rob and James were already there when we arrived. I saw them standing on the porch with Thomas. 3 men, 3 generations of the same jawline and the same wide shoulders. Rob was stocky, kinded, holding a casserole dish. James was taller, thinner, and had Thomas's exact hands. "You look just like Dad," Rob said when I stepped out. "Same eyes, same nose," James added. "I've been waiting 40 years for someone to say that." Thomas crouched down to Lily's level. She studied him the way 6-year-olds study everything, directly, without pretense. "Are you the grandpa who made my chair?" "I am. It smells like outside." Thomas laughed. A real full laugh. The kind that shakes your shoulders. "That's the best review I've ever gotten. We ate lunch at Thomas's kitchen table." The oak one. The hand-joined one. The one built to last 100 years. Lily sat between Rob's daughter, Emma, and James's son, Nathan. Kids who shared her blood, family she didn't know she had. After lunch, we stood on the front porch for a photograph. Thomas in the center, Rob, and James on either side, their wives, their children, and me holding Lily, standing right next to Thomas. I looked at the photo on my phone afterward, and I saw something I had never seen in any family photograph before. I was in the center. Not the edge, not the corner, not slightly outside the frame. The center. Here's where things stand. Lily's adoption was finalized in May. The judge signed the papers on a Tuesday afternoon, and Thomas was in the courtroom. So were Rob and James. So was Megan. So was June. Thomas drives down once a month. He and Lily have a routine. He brings a small piece of scrap wood, and she sands it down while he tells her what kind of tree it came from. She has a collection now lined up on her windowsill. Oak, cherry, walnut, maple. She knows them all by smell. Rob and James FaceTime with Lily every Sunday. She calls them Uncle Rob and Uncle James. They call her Lilybug. She loves it. I met with my mother once 3 months ago. A coffee shop, neutral, ground, the way it has to be now. She looks smaller than I remembered, older. She still hasn't said I'm sorry, but she said I was wrong, and I've decided that might be all she's capable of giving. I accept that. Not because it's enough, because it's real. Gerald and I have not spoken since that phone call. I don't hate him, but I don't need him. And for the first time in my life, I'm at peace with that. Ryan and Megan and I were still family. We always were. But now the relationship is built on truth instead of the version of reality someone else decided for us. My name is Faith Delaney. I'm 41 years old. I'm an ER nurse at Mercy General. I'm the mother of a 6-year-old girl who smells rocking chairs and says they smell like outside. I'm the daughter of Thomas Calloway, a carpenter from Granville, Ohio, who waited 40 years without knowing he was waiting. And for the first time in my life, I know exactly who I am. My name is Faith Delaney. I'm 41 years old and I know who I am. If this story made you feel something, if it reminded you of your own family, your own questions, your own silence, leave a comment. Tell me, what would you have done at that reunion table? Would you have stayed quiet or would you have asked? I want to hear your story. And if you haven't already, subscribe and check the description for more stories like this one. I'll see you in the next.